is Chinenye Ajayi. I am a managing associate and team lead of the power and infrastructure practice at Olaniwun LP, a almost commercial law firm in Nigeria and indeed Africa's largest law firm. Personally, I'm involved in a legal advisory space and I advise clients, government, financial institutions on various types of energy and infrastructure projects. Just to put that in better perspective, first, I provide regulatory compliance advisory, advising clients on kind of licenses, approvals they need to get for their project. On the project development side, I advise on engineering, procurement and construction contracts, operation and maintenance contracts, and the entire set of documents that relates to project development in the energy and infrastructure space. And then on the financing side, I get to advise commercial banks, DFIs, and borrowers as well when it comes to raising money for the execution of energy and infrastructure projects. So apart from that, I'm a very passionate advocate for energy access and the growth of the sector generally. I get to do a lot of writing, speaking engagements, and also an entrepreneur as well. Thank you.
So you talked about access to electricity, and Nigeria is one of the countries with the largest populations without access to electricity. What do you think about this? And what are we doing to improve on?
It is really saddening to know that a country as large as ours, a country with so much resources, whether if you want to look at it from the thermal aspect, gas, and then once you look at it from the renewable aspect, you also have a lot of renewable energy sources, but yet we still lack access to electricity. So I would say it's a big problem, one that has lasted for years, I'm sure even before I was born. But then various steps are being taken at various levels, but I would say it's largely not enough. Particularly, a major aspect of our problem is actually within the transmission and distribution phase, because currently we have not enough, yes, but available about 12 to 13 megawatts. But out of 12 to 13 megawatt capacity that is generated, actually, we find out that only 5,000 or a little less is being transmitted. So we have a couple of problems, but then what can be done about it? I believe we need to do more in improving our infrastructure. We need to do more in attracting investments within the energy sector in order to, boost the infrastructure, make the sector viable, and ensure that we get an electricity access. But most importantly, I would like to say that to bridge this gap really quickly, we can actually focus on renewable energy or distributed renewable energy technologies that ensures that you don't have to wait for the grid. Things like your mini grids, your solar home systems can actually get to those remote areas where you currently do not have electricity access.
All right, thank you very much for that insight, which will take us to grid per se, and now we're focusing on the national grid. This January to date, we've had over 8 collapses.
Yeah.
And recently in October, we also experienced 3 collapses back to back on Monday, Tuesday, then Saturday. So from your perspective, what are the human or business consequences of frequent grid collapse and power outages?
Before I answer the question, let's face a scenario. So imagine a 3-year-old in a hospital in some area where all they have is probably grid supply and they do not have an alternative source of electricity, and all of a sudden there's a grid collapse and the oxygen connected to this child is automatically cut off. So you can imagine what happens to that child. So there's a risk of loss of life. And it means for as long as the grid is down, the patients are unable to access that healthcare service, right? It means that it's possible. I can say that death is one of the great consequences of power outages. It might not be very obvious, it might not be reported in the news, but this is just one of the many consequences that could arise from grid outages. Another one, for instance, would be loss of productivity for businesses, particularly for businesses that rely on electricity. to run. We find that for the period that the grid is down and they don't have access to electricity, other sources, it means that their businesses is down, no income, and you can imagine what that would impact on their families. You can also think about it from manufacturing industries. Grid collapse or instability of the grid would mean that it could affect their very delicate machines and affect their productivity. And if you look at it from another perspective again, it means additional costs for doing business, because people would then have to resort to generators to buy for. So we can go on and on. The impact is enormous. And so it shouldn't be something that we should have back to back, right? Even as much as we know that things like that could happen, but as much as possible, it should be avoided.
All right. Well, thank you very much once again. You've touched on basically the impact of not having electricity, and not just that, the fact that the grid could just collapse at any point, and that child using our source to maintain his health or that of the parents in an hospital could lead to a loss of life. So let's talk about the legal and contractual frameworks, that can help improve grid efficiency in the country.
Okay, so a starting point would be the provision of the Electricity Act, which I find very innovative. We didn't have that in the previous acts, regulating the electricity sector. And the provision actually allows for private sector participation in transmission, because typically what you have is that transmission networks are usually state-owned, right? State government managed. And of course, we know whenever government is managing something, it's not as efficient as it would be in the private sector. So one of the things you find in the Electricity Act right now is that it allows for what you call IET, right? I think independent electricity transmission network licenses, which can be issued to private sectors, to actually private sector participants to manage grid. So that's an opportunity. And so I would say one of the things that can be done to improve grid stability is to let other people do it, let the private sector get involved. But then again, for private sector to get involved, it has to be attractive, there has some form of predictability in terms of laws and policies. There has to be an assurance that they'll get back their investment. So I would say there could be concession part of the grid or whole of the grid, right? And for private sector to operate and maintain. You could also assign private sector participants to construct certain aspects, construct new grids, and they own it for a period of years and then hand it back to the government. You can also ask, there are different contractual frameworks that can come up with this, but this actually starts with providing the right legal and regulatory framework that will form the foundation for all of these initiatives that will in the long run improve the grid efficiency.
All right, thank you very much for the breakdown of how law can help in improving grid electricity in the country. All right, so we've talked about the grid from the national part of things. So let's talk about the alternatives. We have solar, we have wind, we have different sources of energy that are alternatives to grid electricity. So in your experience, what are the cheapest alternatives, and how can a layman out there have access to this? Yes.
Electricity generally is an expensive commodity. Even before the subsidy was removed for Band A customers, you find out that electricity tariff charged in Nigeria is one of the lowest around the world. But then again, there are a couple of alternatives. So like you rightly mentioned, we have, apart from the grid electricity, there's also solar systems, which is actually the most common alternative now aside generator. Because before, I know fuel and generator is one of the cheapest, but now subsidy is out or almost out, and the price is really up there, and then most people can't afford it. Now, a good alternative would be solar systems, but a major challenge with that as well is that the initial capital cost can be expensive, but in the long run, it becomes really cheaper. Right, because of course you don't have to buy fuel anymore. The cost of maintenance is really very low. But what I would say to a layman out there, particularly someone who is probably from low to middle class, is get a solar system that suits your basic needs. Most people want a solar system that power their freezers, their fridge, their air conditioners. That might become very pricey. But the question you need to ask yourself, what do I need electricity for? Most importantly, like what's the basic things I need electricity for? Then get a solar system that can actually power those needs. And the good thing about it is that you can actually scale. So gradually you can begin to scale if you need to add more. So solar systems is actually an alternative. Therefore, areas that don't have access, mini grids are also an alternative, although they can be expensive, but when you compare them to using generators, of course, it pays off in the long run. Yes.
Yeah, because even now, a liter of petrol is going for 1,900 naira now, 900 naira, 1,000 naira, diesel, 1,112. For anybody that wants to look at an alternative, will probably looking the way of solar, which I think is an opportunity in itself, and which would, take us to the next question. We've talked about challenges, we talked about some sort of solutions. Now let's talk about opportunity in this sector. So what's looking at all the problems, look at all the solutions that the Electricity Act has given to us. What are the opportunities to explore in the power sector?
So when it comes to the power sector, the opportunities are enormous. I can take a whole day to discuss that, right? Because when you look, okay, let's look at the national level, yes, or at the grid, from the grid perspective. So we know that electricity divided into generation, transmission, distribution, and for each of these segments, opportunities abound. We know currently the Nigeria's generation capacity is grossly insufficient to meet our energy needs. So that's an opportunity on its own. Then when it comes to transmission aspects, also, of course, we know our transmission infrastructure is terrible and we need investment in that regard. That's an opportunity to invest, of course, subject to laws. Then if you look at distribution as well, there's a whole lot of problems around that area, when it comes to infrastructure, collection, a lot of losses. So that's also an opportunity, because I believe wherever there's a problem, there's an opportunity, because business or profit thrives when you are able to provide solutions to problems. So there's an opportunity in that regard. Then if you want to look at the off-grid space, the off-grid space is, of course, outside the grid. The opportunities are abound. I was recently reading a report by the Lagos State government that was done in collaboration with SA4O, where they talked about that, there are about over 5 million generators in Lagos only. That is enormous. And you can imagine the cost of fueling those generators to their owners. So the fact for those persons operating in the off-grid space, solar, renewable, other renewable energy sources, this is a good market to plug in. You can actually take it upon yourself to displace or replace those generators with cleaner sources that's a lot more viable. So the opportunities abound, whether it's in if you're looking at, if you're a professional as well, whether in finance, engineering, training, education, opportunities abound. I just think what is most important, two things I would say. The government, putting in the right policies that will encourage and incentivize, people to take advantage of these opportunities, put in their monies. And secondly, is for people to be able to develop the skill sets, and get the right technology to solve these problems.
All right, so thank you very much for answering all our questions for today on the power sector investment challenges, and especially as concerns the national grid. But before we let you go, our next question basically concerns every single person in Nigeria, especially in the rural area. And this talks to who owns a transformer in the country, because I nearly put on a glove myself, to fight with Disco the other day. And it prompts me to want to know who owns a transformer, especially if it's coming from the end user consumer.
Okay.
Disco or consumers?
Discos.
All right.
Yes. So Discos own transformers, right? And let me start with the rationale. First, it's legal. The law provides that Discos are responsible for providing transformers, meters, as the case may be, to their customers. So Discos are meant to produce their obligations statutorily, and there's a NEC regulation on investment. It has to do with investment in the electricity sector that was specifically requires Discos to provide, transformers, provide meters for their customers. But then we understand Nigeria's situation, right? For some reason, customers get involved in buying transformers, buying meters, particularly when they made a demand, to the Discos that they are unable to meet up with the demand. So in such scenarios, even if a customer or some group of customers decide to buy a transformer, it still belongs to the Disco. As much as that sounds unfair, but it belongs to the customer. It belongs to Disco, apologies. And the Disco is responsible for maintaining and operating and managing the asset. And So for meters, let me speak to meters for instance. For meters, the way it works is that you're meant to, even if you have to pay for your meter, there's an arrangement, I think a NEC guideline or regulation that states that when you buy your meter, you're meant to be refunded over a period of time from your tariff. So even if you buy that, you're meant to be refunded. And even if there's a NEC regulation on investment as well that permits private entities to actually buy transformers. You can make investments in a distribution infrastructure. But once that is done, it still belongs to DISCO. Now there can be an arrangement where the DISCO refunds back, and refunds to the private entity over a period of time. But substantially and fundamentally, transformers and meters belong to, are owned, operated, and maintained by DISCOs.
Even if the end user consumer way they want to procure it.
As I'm saying, even if they procure it, the best that can happen is a refund over a period of time. Yeah, right. But it belongs to DISCO.
Thank you very much for your time. We truly, really appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. That's Madam, Mrs. Miss.
All right, Mrs. Chinenye. You can just call me Chinenye Ajayi.
Okay, without all the...
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. We truly, really appreciate you, Chinenye Ajayi. An energy lawyer and commercial lawyer. So after today, if you need anything, you need to confirm anything concerning the law on the power sector side of things in the energy sector in Nigeria, you know who to reach out to. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you for having me, Ibrahim. Thank you so much.
All right.